This is the entrepreneur life cycle until you learn how to break free from it. And so there are 6 stages. You have stage 1, which is uninformed optimism. This is where you see your friend or you see something online and it looks like they're making money or it looks like there's some opportunity and you think, oh my God, that sounds amazing. And you have optimism because it looks great, but it's uninformed because you have no idea what it entails. So then you dive in and you say, okay, I'm going to pursue this thing, whatever it is, baking cupcakes, or I'm going to do lawn mowing, or I'm going to do crypto trading, whatever. Second step is you get into it and you're like, oh my God, I don't know. There's so many things involved in this, and this is significantly more complicated than I expected. So then you become an informed pessimist. You now know that it's hard, or significantly harder than you expected. The third stage is you have your crisis of meaning, or the valley of despair. So you're continuing to do this stuff, it's continuing to not work, and you keep working, and it keeps not working. And so this is the step, and this is the point of truth. And this is the cycle where the paths of the entrepreneur split. And the vast majority of people take this next step, which is they then say, you know what? There's that thing over there that my other friend's doing. Maybe I should do that instead. And so then they hop back to uninformed optimism, and then they go boom to informed pessimism, and they just go around and around and around, and they live the same 6 months for 20 straight years. Now, the other path from the valley of despair is sticking with it. And so then you become an informed optimist, because now you understand, you still understood all the bad stuff, but you also understand the good stuff and how to avoid the bad and maximize the good. And then once you're there, you stick on that path long enough and you end up achieving what you originally thought was really easy and fast. And so that cycle, this is more or less the Alex Hormozi life story. When you start out in business, it's unbelievably hard. And the reason that business owners at the highest levels get compensated the way they do is because they were able to make it through that period. They earn the right to earn more in a day than people earn in their lifetimes. You have to learn how to behave in hard circumstances so that you can continue to make it through the hardships that will inevitably come as you grow. And growth comes from a deficiency between your current and desired, or your current and required. You need to be here and you're here, and that stretch hurts because you're inadequate. You have to look at yourself in the mirror and be like, I'm not good enough. And they call them growing pains for a reason. And so if you're like, man, I wish I could grow really fast, you're actually wishing for a tremendous amount of pain for an extended period of time. And then when people don't have that, or they hit their first pain, they're somehow surprised that it hurts. And the thing of the pain of business is it's not just like this visceral physical pain. Of course, you have those from time to time. But a lot of the pain of being in business is not knowing the fuck you're doing and feeling like an idiot. Being like, why am I not good enough? Why do these other people, why are they doing so much better than me? Like, what conclusions can I derive from that? There's only one of two paths. Either I have something outside of my control that I can cast my blame to, or I have to take the punch to my ego and say, I'm just not that good. That guy's better because he's unethical. Okay, sure. If that's what makes you feel better, and now what? And so the things that make it hard is that, one, you have to accept that you're not good, and you have to do it over and over and over again. Right when you think you're good again, the world proves to you that you're not as good as you think you are. And this happens at all levels of business. The same thing is when you have those plateaus, it's been a year, it's been 2 years, it's been 3 years, right? It means that you haven't changed. You've behaved the same, and so you're getting the same outputs. And the change is painful. And sometimes the painful change means that you actually have to take 2 steps back. And your ego not only has to get hurt, but hurt even more. Because you have to realize that you built your thing wrong. You hired the wrong leader. You have the wrong team culture within a department. What do? Well, you either leave it there and stay perpetually under your potential because you weren't willing to confront the difficulty of the inconveniences that are going to come to you as a result of making the changes that you know you need to make but aren't making. And so I bring this up because we feel like we're the only people who experience this. Like, our pain is more than other people's. Our love is deeper than other people's. But when we do that, we rob ourselves of the ability to learn from others that came before us. The other people who already learned what this is like, who've described the pain. And listen, even if you try to take as much advice as you possibly can, you're still gonna get burned. It's still gonna hurt. I have yet to see someone really start figuring out what's going on in less than 5 years. And I'm saying 5 years of being in the game, not 5 years of I have an idea, I'm really passionate about this, I've been reading stuff on the side, I work on the weekends. I'm saying all in for 5 years. And you just start, you just begin to get a grasp of what it takes to be good at business. And the difficulty is that it's so hard to teach business in school because it changes so much. The principles remain the same, but the game changes. And I think that we judge ourselves because we somehow believe that we're behind other people. It's one of the most painful things that we can do, is that we just, obviously you compare yourself, and then after making the comparison, there's nothing wrong with comparing yourself to other people. That's how you figure out discrepancies. But then you label it. Then you say, and I suck as a result, and I'm worthless, and I'm never gonna be good enough, right? But if the first part is valuable, that guy's better at ads than me. What is he doing that I'm not doing? I should learn that, right? Not, that guy's better than me at ads, and therefore I suck as a human being and will never win. I call that loop and that the person on the other side, the woman in the red dress, which is probably my favorite part of the Matrix movie, which is Neo, who's the main character, is in a program to teach him one thing. And so he's walking through the crowded streets of what looks like a New York City with Morpheus leading him. And he's droning on about something that he's supposed to learn. And he says, Neo, were you listening to me? Or were you looking at the woman in the red dress? And Neo was looking at the woman in the red dress as Morpheus is talking. And then he says, look again. And he looks back at the woman in the red dress, and it's Agent Smith with a gun pointed at his head. And in that moment, he's like, freeze. And he explains that you're either one of us or one of them. And they are the people who are sentinels sent to destroy us. And so what appears to be the woman in the red dress is actually an agent from the system meant to destroy the opportunity that you're in right now. And so I love the woman in the red dress so much because it's so real. Because you're in this thing, you're in this relationship with your business, and you're like, this girl seems great. And then you get to know her and you find out she snores when she sleeps. And all of a sudden it's like, you see the sweatpants and no makeup in the morning, and you realize that sometimes she's moody, whatever. But you start to get to know her. You're like, I don't know if we're gonna get married, but this is kind of where we're at. And then you see a woman in the red dress, and you're like, you know what? I think that's the girl. And so you quit this relationship with your business and you get into that relationship. But then you realize that girl has crabs, she has a crazy ex-boyfriend, and you're like, oh my God, I don't want to deal with any of this stuff, right? And so my CFO, was one of the first people that you're like, oh my God, I hired that person, it changed everything. So my CFO in Jim Launch had taken 4 companies from 0 to 100 million. She had done over 40 M&A transactions. Her largest one was 5 billion, super experienced. She was at the very end of her career. And she was like, I'll take you guys, I'll take this one last ride with you guys. And so, mind you, Layla and I'm 26 or 27 at the time. Layla's 23, 24, and we're sitting across the table from a very experienced business person being like, please help us. And so one of the things that she taught me that I'll never forget is she said, the grass is always greener on the other side. You just don't know that it's fertilized with shit. And she's Southern, so she had this deep Southern accent. She's like, there's always shit. Shit everywhere. And so she's like, I've been in enough businesses to know that all businesses have shit. And so you just have the shit you don't know about and the shit you do know about. And you're in this business, and so this is the shit you know. And that has been so profoundly impactful in my life because it was so hard for me to break the cycle. Really hard for me. I gave you my life story of the many businesses that I've been involved in. And so the entrepreneurial ADD has been so real for me. And I've made some of the biggest career mistakes by just pursuing and splitting my attention between multiple endeavors. And I can say truthfully that this 2024 was the first year, and this is now 2025, the first time in my life where I haven't experienced FOMO, so fear of missing out. And it was one of those things that I just always had. I would see somebody doing this, oh man, I should be getting into that, like that. I should be doing this, I should be doing that. And it was one of those things, kind of like being happy, where you don't realize you're happy. You just look back and you're like, you know what? That was really good. You kind of see it in retrospect. What I realized was that now when I hear someone say oh my God, I crushed it with this thing, I think that's amazing for them. I'm sure there's tons of problems that I don't know about, and that's amazing. But I'm going to keep doing this thing because this is the only thing I know how to do pretty well. And I'm just going to keep compounding my information advantage against everybody else who thinks this is easy and wants to get into it. And so I think that any massive company that you know of has existed for multiple decades. And in order for something to exist for multiple decades, the founder has to stay focused on that thing for the whole time. And I measure focus by the quantity and quality of things that you say no to. And I measure commitment, or I define commitment as the elimination of alternatives. And so if you think of marriage as the ultimate commitment, then it is the ultimate commitment because you've eliminated literally every alternative besides this person. And so I think that many business problems and many entrepreneurs would 5x, 10x their business if they simply gave themselves no way out. This is what I'm doing. And the term, burning the boats, but I'm eliminating all alternatives and structuring my life such that I make it very difficult to pursue the alternatives. And I think by doing that, you can actually conquer this cycle and make it past the split where you go crash and burn and then restart the doom loop, or make it to informed optimism and then eventually to the achievement that you want.
There's so much there. But it's such an important point. So where shall I start? So at that moment here, this crisis of meaning moment, what I see so much of is entrepreneurs not necessarily quitting the old thing, but just taking on something else. And I get entrepreneurs will come up to me in the gym and they'll say, hey, Steve, just want to let you know what I do and see if you can offer me any advice. And then they'll list 3 things. They'll say, I'm starting this crypto thing with my friend Dave. I've got this hair business where we're selling on e-com, and I've got this other thing. And they almost assume that the more things they're doing, the higher the probability that they'll be successful in something.
Fully gone from a nation of owners or a country of owners or a world of owners to a nation of renters or serfs, in another word. And the idea is, what if we could take that back? And that's the whole premise of everything we do, is getting people into the owner's chair, into ownership, as opposed to letting other people be the architects of their lives. And it took me way too long to do that. And so I'm hoping that it will take other people less time if we share, where I could have like a soft landing. I could stair-step my way out of a corporate job. So I started buying these small businesses with the idea that maybe one day they could just meet my costs. And then I realized, oh God, I'm thinking so small. This could be way bigger than what anybody else could pay me. But I was a working job, for sure.
We zoom in on that moment because I think most people listening to this now can relate to that moment of maybe hearing you speak and hearing your content online, or hearing an Alex Hormozi or whatever, hearing Gary Vaynerchuk, whoever it might be, talk about starting that business, pursuing that side hustle. But there's this psychological barrier to overcome, which most of us can't overcome. We call it fear. We say, I'm waiting for the perfect time. I don't have the confidence. If you zoom in on that, now you've started this new journey in your life where you're creating content and you're advising people on how they can pursue the paths that you've pursued it yourself. What have you come to learn about what holds us back in that moment, and the maybe the falseness of the stories we tell ourselves? You described it as being a scaredy cat.
Yeah. At least for myself, what I'll say is, daughter of immigrants, who thought that what I had achieved was the pinnacle, people that I love more than anybody in the world. And maybe that's similar for a lot of people listening. The people who love you, they want what's best for them, typically, which is that you're safe, you're secure, everything's okay. They don't really want what's quote unquote best for you, because that's actually the scary thing. Real growth happens when you take huge risks and you potentially fail and you realize that you're not going to die. And so I realized that my loved ones were some of the reasons that were actually holding me back. Super supportive, but they were always saying things like, is the grass always greener, Codie? What about this next thing? Is that really going to make you happy? Are you sure it's not you? Is it them? And in some cases, they're right. I just have that ridiculous urge to keep growing and doing more. But that made me jump from 5 finance companies in like 10 years or something like that, because I thought it was the individual company, and I didn't realize, oh no, I'm just like unemployable. I want to work for myself. I'm not going to be great at being at somebody else's employee. But it was the stories that I heard again and again from my family because they wanted to keep me safe. Very kind, but not right for me.
So in your life, there comes a moment where you make this kind of peculiar decision. And I say peculiar because most people don't make the decision to start off-ramping from the corporate world, essentially.
Yeah.
You buy your first business, right? So you're in a job.
Yeah.
and while you're in the job, you decide to buy a business.
Yeah.
Did you have loads of cash when you did that?
No. In fact...
And why did you do it? What was the thought process that made you go, do you know what, that's a good idea?
I think it's usually triggered from some sort of pain. Like at that time, I was fighting a little bit with the CEO of the company that I was working in. And they really wanted me to run this business that I'd taken from zero to a couple billion in assets under management. And they wanted me to continue running it, but I started getting press and stuff started happening because we had this growth. And they wanted me to do it really quietly. And not as much the CEO, but some of the other managing directors. I was by far the youngest. I was the only female. And, that company was wild. But they basically, in many ways, were like, you need to do it our way. And I was like, well, your way didn't get you to this couple $2 billion under management. It works great for you guys over here, but it didn't over there. So, no, I'm going to run the business this way. And so we were kind of arguing a little bit. And I think I saw the writing on the wall that it wasn't my casino. They weren't my chips. I was working for somebody else. And at the end of the day, they were writing the rules, as is fair. It was their business. And I knew that at some point I was either going to get pushed out or leave. And so at that point, I started buying these businesses on the side because I wasn't sure I wanted to work for somebody ever again.
I'm fascinated by the first step people take, because the first step seems to be the hardest. That first step to buying that first business, and you're stepping out into uncertainty and the unknown there. And that's really like if I could give one thing to the audiences that have listened to me for the last 10 years on social media and on this podcast, it would just be the answer to taking that first step, like out into, like you did at 29, 30, to buy that first business. Talk to me about specifically that first one. What were you looking for? Yep. What was your thesis? And I guess, how did you learn? How did you learn about buying, as you call them, boring businesses? Yeah. Well,
I had a benefit, which is, as a journalist, I sort of infiltrated finance. I'm not technically as intelligent. I'm not a financial modeling guru. I'm not a lot of things that people are in finance, but I'm pretty decent at asking questions and then figuring out who are the right people that could get me the answers. And so what I realized pretty quickly is we were doing a bunch of deals. I was doing deals that were tens of millions, hundreds of millions, and billion-dollar deals. And I don't know why it took me so long, but I realized there's no difference, like materially, between $1 billion, $100 million, a $10 million deal, and a $1 million deal. And if that's the case, then I bet if I have a couple $100,000 or $10,000, I could do a much smaller deal. Wouldn't I be able to do the exact same thing? So I saw behind the curtain, like at the Wizard of Oz, and realized that the wizard was actually pretty short. And because I saw that, then I just said, well, now we just work backwards. And just like you would buy, $100 million condo unit or, condo building, you could see how you could go all the way back and buy your first studio, right? It's the same thing with businesses. It's just stair-stepping real estate. And so at the time, my biggest constraint was not knowledge. I knew how to do deals. It was time. I was working 60, 70 hours a week. And so one of the first deals I did was a laundromat deal because I figured, well, you don't need somebody to run it full time. And it was a $100K transaction. And so that wouldn't bankrupt me. And, I could buy a little business like this, and that business could keep running even while I wasn't there. And I could have an operator that could probably help me with anything that went sideways.
Where did you find a laundromat to buy for $100K? Was it a website? Did you know the guy? Or
no, know the guy. So basically what happened for my first deals, I didn't have a framework. So it was just, hey, I do these really big deals. Could I do a smaller deal? And if I could do a smaller deal, what would be the easiest small deal to do that would be the least risk? And so at the time, I knew a guy that was running a couple of laundromats. So I basically said to him, hey, if I find one for you, will you help me operate it? And he knew how to do that. So the very first one we had was in California. And that's one of the secrets to this is two things. First, you have to learn how to do deals, which is not really that complex. We just make it sound complex in finance because financial lingo is like the moat around how we make money, right? The less people speak our language, the more we can charge them, which is the secret. And then the second aspect was how to run a laundromat, right? Like, I don't know, machine breaks, what am I going to do? And so then I had this guy who knew how to run these. And I could just find the deal for him, close the deal for him, and be the cash for him.
Why did they sell to you?
old. These are 68-year-old owners of a business that have been running this laundromat plus a bunch of other small businesses in the vicinity for 20, 30 years. And so can you imagine running your podcast for 30 years? It'd probably be fun, but by the end, you might be open to selling. Now imagine you had a laundromat for 30 years. You're dealing with broken machines, or there's somebody who's homeless messing around with some stuff. At a certain point, you don't even want to continue with a profitable business. And this is where people get it so wrong. All the time on the internet, people love to tell me, no way would anybody sell a business. That business made $67,000 in profit. So I bought it for $100K a year. Did $67,000. And people on the internet do one of two things to that. They go, no fucking way, it didn't happen. And why would somebody sell? And did you give them a bad deal? And the second group of people go, that's a terrible deal. I'd never do that deal because you don't have enough profit in that for that to be a business, not a job. So those are the two things. And to the first one, I'd say in the US right now, there are tens of millions of small businesses for sale that will never sell. And I tell a story about my Uncle Eb, who had a small business that was exactly that he closed down, which by the way, costs you money, as opposed to selling, because he had no idea his business was sellable. Like many businesses that I had before I did this, I shut down instead of selling them. I didn't even realize that, even though I was in finance. And then to the second group, I'd say, you start with a small business that probably isn't the greatest business for you to own long term, but businesses are like real estate. You can turn around and sell them after you get in the game. But I think of these businesses, I call them gateway drug businesses. They're once you learn how to do a deal, you'll never see the world the same again. It will change your entire perspective on everything. You will walk in everywhere and you will realize that business is full of masochists like you and me who do this despite it being awful many times, but we love it in some way. But at some point, we're going to want to sell our thing and move on to the next. And so everywhere around you, right now, wherever you are, somebody sitting next to you wants to sell their business. And what if you could figure out how to buy that business, put in an operator in it, and then do it again and again and again? And that's the only difference between you and Warren Buffett or Blackstone or these big, huge companies.
Is it important to have competence in the area and the industry that you're trying to buy these small businesses in your point of view?
Not really, no. Not at all.
But it helps, right?
Oh, of course it helps. More important than anything is it's sort of like real estate. It's really about the deal. Can you read a balance sheet? Can you understand profit and loss, which is not that difficult to understand? And then can you figure out how to get to the person that can get you answers? So for instance, I didn't know anything about laundromats, but I knew a guy who knew laundromats. Often what I tell people these days is I'm more old school. Like I would go knock on doors and I would shake business owners' hands. But you could also go to Reddit, where there are platforms with 100,000 electricians on them. And so if you wanted to buy an HVAC company, which is like heating, air conditioning, and often electricity, I would go on there and I would try to find electricians in my local area and I would ask them questions and I would pay them for an hour consult to figure out how to run this business. I think we forget in this day and age how easy it is to get the information that we want. And so we listen to the fear of the fact that we don't know what we're doing. And I actually think that's irrational. I think it's really easy for somebody to tell you why things won't work. It's actually quite hard to convince somebody that they're capable of doing something.
What if I don't have 100K? You had 100K, right?
Yeah.
Say I'm working a job, I've saved up, I don't know, $5,000.
Yeah.
It's like, create your narrative of why you're even doing this. And if you can explain to somebody why they should care about this problem, or more specifically, why you care about this problem, I'll tell you this, more investors will, I might be like, I don't care about kitchen utensils, but this girl certainly does. And I'm sure there's other women who do too. And what everyone wants to see is obsession. And unfortunately, in some of the world, I know more in the UK than the US now, that kind of perspective of just being all in obsessed with stuff has almost been bastardized or been chastised. But the people who are obsessed are the ones who change the world, at least change their world. And I think that, so a very close friend of mine did all the Olympic teams, nutrition and supplementation stuff for a country overseas. And he said, you know the difference between champions and everyone else? And I was like, what? And he said, everyone always looks at them and says, what do champions have that I don't have? And he said, they have it backwards. He said, it's what do champions not have that I have? It's what do they lack? And it's an off button. They just don't stop. And so in dealing with the gold medal studies, like they just never stop. They just can't stop. Everything in their life is geared towards one goal. And so finding that thing, and they approach everything in their life that way. And I think that that level of obsession around like everything that you touch on a daily basis is required for really getting to where you want to go.